You finally get there. The promotion, the house, the relationship you actually wanted, the number in your bank account that used to feel impossible. And within 6 months, you've found something wrong with it. Not manufactured wrong, real wrong. A legitimate reason why this isn't quite right, why the timing's off, why there's something else you need to handle first before you can actually enjoy this. And the thing is, you're not lying. You believe it completely. Nobody handed you this habit. Nobody sat you down and said, when good things happen, find the exit. But somewhere between the house you grew up in and the man you became, you learned that comfort was temporary and waiting for it to fall apart was just being realistic. That's not pessimism. That's a survival program that outlived the thing it was built for. My name is Frank, and today we're talking about why older Gen X men sabotage their own happiness. Not the dramatic kind, not the kind that ends marriages in one night or blows up a career in a single decision. The quiet kind, the slow leak, the one that's so woven into how you operate that most of the time you don't even see it as sabotage. You call it being practical, you call it staying sharp, you call it not getting ahead of yourself, but there's another name for it, and by the end of this we're going to talk about what it actually is, where it came from, and what it costs you every single day you keep running it. Let's start with the house you grew up in, not the layout, the mood. If you were born between 1965 and 1972, your parents were most likely boomers or late silent generation, and in that house, happiness wasn't really a topic. Not because your parents were cruel, most of them weren't, but because their generation had a different operating system entirely. They came out of scarcity. Some of them came out of real hardship, and the lesson that got passed down, not in words but in everything you watched, was that you don't count your chickens. You don't celebrate too early. You don't get comfortable because comfortable is where things go sideways. Your father didn't come home from a good day at work and talk about how good it felt. He came home, sat down, and started thinking about tomorrow. Your mother didn't finish paying off a bill and throw a party. She looked at the next one. The emotional register in that house was steady and forward-facing. Gratitude was quiet. Satisfaction was private, and joy, real open joy. That was something you kept close to the chest because the universe had a way of noticing when you got too relaxed. You absorbed all of that before you had the language to question it. And now you're in your 50s wondering why you can't just sit inside a good thing without immediately scanning it for cracks. Here's what that programming actually looks like in adult life, because it doesn't always look like self-destruction, most of the time. It looks like responsibility. You get a raise and your first thought isn't celebration. It's taxes, it's whether this changes your bracket. You finish a big project and instead of taking a breath, you're already thinking about the next one. Your kid has a great year and you're proud, genuinely proud, but you're also quietly cataloging what they still need to work on. You take a vacation and spend the first 2 days checking your phone and the last 2 days anxious about going back. None of that looks like sabotage from the outside. From the outside, it looks like a man who stays on top of things, a man who doesn't get sloppy, a man who takes his responsibilities seriously. And that's exactly why it's so hard to catch, because the sabotage is disguised as virtue, the thing that's quietly draining your ability to enjoy your life is wearing the same clothes as your best qualities. That's the trap, and it's a well-built one. There's a concept in psychology called the window of tolerance. It's the emotional range where a person feels safe enough to actually be present. Not anxious, not shut down, just here. And what researchers have found is that people who grew up in unpredictable or high-pressure environments, even loving ones, often have a very narrow window, not because something is wrong with them, because their nervous system learned early that relaxation carried risk. For older Gen X men, that window got narrowed by a specific combination of things. The ambient distrust of institutions that you absorbed from the living room during Watergate and Vietnam. The economic uncertainty your parents carried that you felt even when nobody explained it. The cultural message aimed specifically at boys that said your worth was tied to your output, not your experience. And the general understanding, never stated but always present, that life was something you managed, not something you enjoyed. All of that stacked up, and what it produced was a man who is incredibly skilled at performing under pressure and genuinely uncomfortable when the pressure lifts. Let's talk about relationships for a minute because this is where the sabotage gets most visible and most painful. A lot of older Gen X men have a pattern that goes like this. Things are difficult in a relationship. You work hard, you stay in it, you push through, and then things get genuinely good. The argument gets resolved, the distance closes, there's real warmth and connection, and that's exactly when something in you gets restless. You pick a fight that didn't need to happen. You pull back for no reason you can name. You suddenly find 17 things that need your attention that weren't urgent yesterday. Your partner notices. They don't always say it directly, but they notice. And if they're patient, they ride it out. If they're not, it becomes a pattern that slowly erodes something real. You're not doing this because you don't love them. You're doing it because intimacy without tension feels unfamiliar, because somewhere in your wiring, closeness without conflict registers as temporary, and temporary things you learned a long time ago, you don't fully settle into, you stay slightly ready to move. That's not a character flaw, that's an adaptation, but it's an adaptation that made sense in one context and is quietly destroying the thing you actually want in another. Now let's talk about success, because this one's specific to men who worked their way up through something real. If you built your career from the ground up, if you started without much and created something through actual sustained effort, there's a version of success that feels almost dangerous. Not consciously, you don't walk around thinking your good fortune is going to be taken away, but the behavior tells a different story. You keep working at the same intensity after you no longer need to. You keep proving yourself to rooms that already respect you. You can't downshift even when downshifting is exactly what the situation calls for. Part of that is identity. Your work ethic isn't just something you do, it's who you are. The generation that raised you didn't separate those things. A man who worked hard was a good man. A man who slowed down was a man who was slipping, and that equation got wired in deep. But part of it is something else. Part of it is that success, real success, puts you in unfamiliar territory. When you were working towards something, the rules were clear. Work harder, stay focused, outperform. But once you've arrived, the rules get murky. What do you do now? How do you justify taking up space when you're not actively earning it? How do you enjoy something you were never taught to receive? So you keep producing, not because you have to, but because producing is the only mode that feels legitimate. According to research from the American Psychological Association, men over 45 report significantly lower levels of emotional satisfaction than their external circumstances would predict, meaning the men who by every measurable standard have built a good life are among the least likely to describe themselves as genuinely happy. And the gap between what they have and what they feel is widest in the generation that came up during the late 60s and 70s. That's not a coincidence, that's a pattern. And it points directly back to what was and wasn't modeled in those households. You can build toward a good life for decades, but if nobody ever showed you how to inhabit one, you'll keep standing just outside it, making sure everything is in order, checking for problems, staying ready, while the thing you built sits there waiting for you to actually walk in. Here's the part that took most Gen X men a long time to name, and some of you are going to recognize this immediately. Happiness feels irresponsible. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way you'd admit out loud, but somewhere in the back of your operating system, there's a quiet belief that if you're genuinely content, you're probably missing something. That satisfaction is the thing that makes you slow down, and slowing down is the thing that gets you caught off guard, that the men who are really happy are the men who haven't looked closely enough at what could go wrong. So you maintain a low level of dissatisfaction as a feature, not a bug. It keeps you sharp. It keeps you moving. It keeps you from getting blindsided by the thing you didn't see coming. The problem is that you can tame that narrowly. You can't be selectively dissatisfied. When you keep the edge on for everything, the edge is on for everything. The good stuff gets the same treatment as the risks. Your wins get audited the same way your losses do. And over time, the internal landscape flattens out, not dramatically, just gradually, until you realize one day that you can't actually remember the last time you felt good without immediately qualifying it. So what do you do with all of this? Because this isn't a character flaw and it's not a diagnosis, it's a pattern, and patterns can be interrupted. The first thing is just noticing it without judgment. not catching yourself and immediately turning it into another thing you need to fix, because that's just the same program running in a different direction. Just noticing. You finished something good and your mind went straight to the next problem. Okay, you're in a good moment with someone you love and something in you pulled back. Okay, you're not broken, you're just running old code. The second thing is understanding what the pattern was originally for. It kept you safe. It kept you moving in the environment where it developed. It was a reasonable response to real conditions. Giving it credit doesn't mean keeping it forever, but understanding it means you stop fighting yourself and start working with something you can actually see clearly. And the third thing, the one that takes the most time, is practicing the thing your generation was never taught. Receiving, letting something good just be good for a minute before you move on to the next thing. Not because you're going soft, not because you're dropping your guard, but because you spent decades building something, and the whole point of building something is to eventually stand inside it. The older Gen X man isn't a man who doesn't know how to be happy. He's a man who was trained so thoroughly to earn things that he never learned to accept them. Those are different problems with different solutions. And the solution to this one isn't working harder. It's something that probably felt like weakness for most of your life, and only starts feeling like wisdom somewhere around 50. It's allowing. Allowing the good thing to be good. Allowing yourself to be in it without immediately preparing to lose it. Allowing the people around you to see that it matters to you, that you're not just managing your life from a safe distance but actually living inside it. You were built to last. You proved that a long time ago. But lasting isn't the same as living, and the work in front of you now isn't harder than anything you've already done. It just requires a different set of tools than the ones you're used to reaching for. The good news is you've always been good at learning new tools. You just usually need a reason to pick them up. This is the reason. I've been working through a lot of these patterns in more depth in a book called Psychology of Gen X. It covers the habits, the wiring, the specific generational experience that built the men you became and what it looks like when those habits stop serving you. If that sounds like something worth looking at, it's linked in the description below. See you in the next one.